Everyone, welcome. My name is Maya Paley. I'm the Director of Advocacy and Community Engagement here at the National Council of Jewish Women, Los Angeles. Thank you all for being here, for coming out on a Thursday evening and dealing with the traffic and the parking situation. You know, it was challenging tonight, but we're really excited to have all of you here. And we're very excited about this event with MAZON, and we'll get more into that in a little bit. Just a little bit about NCJW LA, for those of you who've never been here before. We've been around for over 100 years. We are a social justice organization, a grassroots organization of volunteers, and we strive to improve the quality of life for women, children, and families throughout Los Angeles and also throughout the country. It's a national organization, but we have sections throughout the country, and we all do our own work to improve the quality of life for women, children, and families. So in LA, we serve, I think, around 12,000 individuals in need through various programs, including mental health support. So we actually provide therapy on a sliding scale that goes down to 0, and most of our clients are paying absolutely nothing. We have support groups, we have a scholarship fund helping a lot of single moms get an education that they want. We do advocacy, and this is part of our advocacy programming, and we're fighting for issues like stopping human trafficking, reproductive justice, economic justice, fighting racism and anti-Semitism, LGBTQ rights, and sexual violence is another big issue that we work on. And then we also have our after-school programs, art and literacy programs for youth. So we have a lot of volunteers who go into schools and provide art and literacy programs and homework clubs for elementary school students. So I just wanted to fill you in and let you all know about all that we do, and we'd love for you to get involved, volunteer with us, come find me or Carrie Jacobus over there or any of our board members. Raise your hand if you're a board member, and you can learn more and get involved. And I'm just going to call up Helen Davidoff, who is our board president. And Helen is just this incredible individual. She has 4 little children. She has her own business. She's a powerhouse. You could read her bio in the program, but just know that she's amazing and does so much. I can't believe how much she does with her time.
Good evening, everyone. I want to say that we're honored and so thankful to have MAZON here with us tonight. And thank you for bringing the This Is Hunger truck. I was in there. It was incredibly touching and powerful. So thank you for bringing it here and let us work this event together. Also, a very special thank you to the Feminist Majority Foundation for co-sponsoring this event. Hunger is really personal to me. I'm an immigrant. I came from Odessa, Ukraine. I was born during communism. So for me, hunger was part of my everyday existence from birth till I left Ukraine. I remember my father telling us that we're going to be moving to America. It's the land of opportunity. There are supermarkets with aisles and aisles of food, and there's something called buffets. I can go into a restaurant and put as much food on a plate as possible and keep going back and getting more. I was thrilled as a little child. That was extremely exciting. I also remember our journey to come to America. I remember our first train ride was 4 days long. We could only pack what we could take, so we had to leave everything behind, including a lot of family members. So the only people that came were my father, my mother, my sister, and I, and an uncle with his wife and their 3 children. We packed smoked meats and some bread. By the end of that trip, that bread was stale, but that was not something new to us. We had been raised eating stale bread and butter for several meals. We had a long journey where we depended on a lot of good people to help us through our journey to get to America. We went to Italy, we went to Austria, we lived behind a hotel where the chef would sneak us food at night. I remember going downstairs and looking at the store and really wanting yogurt and not being able to afford it. My parents just kept saying, just wait till we get to America, because we'll have yogurt then. Actually, we were really lucky because another patron saw me and my sister, 2 little girls, and said, "Can I buy you this yogurt?" So we ended up sharing that yogurt. I still remember the way it tastes to this day. I think it was my first time having something so extravagant. We got to America, and it was not the land of opportunity. It was actually really scary and lonely. We didn't speak English. We were alienated. We were lucky that we had a community of synagogues and JCC that got us here and welcomed us here and provided us support. Although in the beginning it was very little, it was still something. My parents had to work 12 to 18 hours a day. My sister and I raised each other. We didn't know anything different. For us, this was the norm. We didn't know when our next meal would come. Sometimes we didn't know if we would have a next meal. We knew we had bread and we knew we had butter, and sometimes we would make that last for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And that was okay because my parents were really working hard to provide an opportunity, 2, 3 jobs. And I remember my mom was always stressed, and it was very lonely in the household. With my sister and I, we tried to make the best of it. But when my mom was there, the sole responsibility of being our caretaker fell on her. And I had a chance to talk to her recently, and I asked, "How was it for you?" I never asked you, "How was it for you?" Because my father was pretty much missing. He was working. If he wasn't in school getting a new degree because he had to get re-educated to learn English to start working again, he was working odd jobs. You know, he was one of the guys that you would see on the corner of the Home Depot. He would get jobs. This is someone that has an engineering background in Ukraine, comes here, and he will do whatever he needs to do to put any food on our table. Rent was very expensive for us, so sometimes it meant paying rent versus getting a meal, paying rent versus getting medical care. So there was always that struggle that we were not sure how it's going to be. But after sitting down with my mother, she just said she was very depressed. She was really scared. She never thought that we'd come out of it. She thought that this was going to be our life. She thought that America was a great promise that would never come to anything. My sister and I became a statistic. We were part of the 25% of children that didn't know where their next meal was coming from. Our family became a statistic. We were 1 in 10 families that are food insecure. 16% of people in LA County are hungry. They're food insecure. 1.5 million people. When I say hunger is personal to me, it truly is. I've been blessed. I can really say that. My family has been blessed. My parents did work really hard. They kept saving. And with our community and synagogues coming together, I actually remember JCC dropping off our first turkey for Thanksgiving. I really didn't know what the holiday was, but I knew we got to eat this delicious large chicken-looking thing. It was really exciting. Again, something that was just astounding to us. To see the community come through and support a family like that, and we're one of the lucky families. I truly believe we're one of the lucky families that's been able to move past the hunger issue for ourselves. But it can't be ignored because it's so prevalent here in Los Angeles, and it touches, I think somebody in the crowd said tonight, even if we're not the ones that are hungry, it still affects us. And that's just the truth. So I'm really honored to invite Abby Liebman to speak today. She has been president and CEO of the MAZON, a Jewish response to hunger since 2011. She's nationally recognized leader in women's rights and social justice advocacy for the last 20 years. I'm sure for 20 more. Ms. Liebman has worked with and led some of California's most prominent nonprofit organizations, including the California Women's Law Center, which she also co-founded. I think that you could read more about her and her bio in the pamphlet. I'm looking forward to hearing her speak, and I am personally thankful that you bring awareness of hunger, because our neighbors had no idea that we were hungry. They had no idea that my parents were struggling to put food on the table because we didn't look like we were hungry. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Helen. That was not only a very great gracious introduction. It's very courageous to talk about your background in front of a room full of relative strangers. And we at MAZON are really grateful both to the Feminist Majority Foundation, but particularly to NCJW, not only for having us here this evening and for providing us with this opportunity to meet and engage with all of you about what we see as a really crucial issue facing America, but also to allow us to park the This Is Hunger truck in your parking lot. As you can imagine, there are not a whole lot of places in LA where you can park an 18-wheeler for a couple of days and still leave room for other cars to park, should that be necessary. How many of you had an opportunity to go inside the truck before? Excellent. Okay, so what I'm going to try to do is to now verbalize some of the things that I think the truck does a brilliant job of being more evocative about, to grab some greater emotional response, to provide you with imagery and words and phrases and the voices of people who are confronting what is, in my view, a real shanda in America, a shame for those of you who don't speak the Yiddish, that is a hidden problem. As Helen said, it is still true today that for many people in many of our communities, you could never tell who it is that's struggling with food insecurity, which is the wonky way we talk about what hunger is in America. And that terminology actually means not so much that you are starving or that you're hungry. I may not know that you asked hungry before I had lunch today. I'm hungry now because I haven't had dinner yet. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about are people who will have to forego a meal because they can't afford to pay for it, because they don't have enough groceries in their house to feed the whole family. So people are skipping meals, they are allowing their children to eat and they're not eating, and they don't know if they're going to eat at their next meal. And that's what it means to be food insecure. I mean, it really sounds very descriptive about what it is. And this evening, I had asked if I could focus my remarks on the issues about hunger as they confront particularly women in the United States. And those of you who either read my bio or who know me know that I really cut my teeth as a lawyer on women's rights issues. And I feel very passionately about them. And I feel that they are a central part of what we should be talking about when we talk about what poverty is in America. The feminization of poverty is not a novel concept, and it didn't go away just because people stopped using that terminology. The vast majority of the people who are poor in the United States are women, and they are living in households with their children. So many people in advocacy will talk about the issue about poverty as it affects women and children. It is women and their children. Children don't exist actually in a little vacuum. I mean, there are some that I'm certain are in orphanages, but there are many that are in families, and it's those children that we're talking about because they are part of the 12 million families that are headed by women in this country that live in poverty. And that is by far the vast majority of people. 80% of the single person-headed households in America are female-headed households. So when we're talking about single family parent, we're talking about women. We don't often name women when we talk about them and their issues. I don't know why that is. We gender neutralize everything now. And we rush to try to make it so that everybody is a part of that equation, but then we miss not only the reality, but the potential solution to those challenges. So women are still the primary caretakers for children in the United States. I know there are wonderful men who are co-parenting and do great things for their children and are not only supporting them financially, but take them to soccer games and coach Little League and maybe even take them out to buy shoes when they need them. I don't know, but the vast majority of the care in this country that is provided to children is provided by women. Both the unpaid work that is mothers and legal guardians, and also the waged work, that is the child care workers in the United States, the majority of whom are women, are among the lowest paid workers in America. And one of the comparisons that we draw is that, you actually, the average pay for a parking lot attendant is more than the average pay for a child care worker. Which actually in Los Angeles is probably an accurate reflection of our priorities, but this is, and maybe electric vehicle parking, you get paid more even. But when you think about what women's lives look like, when you think about what the challenges are that women face, then you begin to understand what needs to happen in this country in order to address their poverty. And poverty and food insecurity aren't necessarily synonymous. There are people who are food insecure who do not are not measured as poor in the United States. In order to be called poor in America, to really meet the federal guidelines, you have to be really poor. So we're talking about family of four, and their income is like under $25,000 a year. And there are many people who are making $30,000 a year who are not then termed poor in America, but still cannot make ends meet. And in a place like Los Angeles, there was just a big report today about the fact that, you know, the housing cost, rent here has increased 100% in the last 17 years, as I can attest, since my daughter's looking for an apartment, can't move out. That, you know, that single parent thing, it never goes away. Which, by the way, I don't know how many of you are single parents or whoever were a single parent. We did a mailing this month about single parents, women-headed households, and talked about how there are terrible challenges that women who are single parents have to face. And one of our donors wrote to me to tell me that she had been a single parent and she didn't face any barriers, and I shouldn't generalize like that. No. Now, I'm a lawyer. I lived an upper middle class lifestyle when my children came into my life, and I was a single parent. I'm going to tell you, I faced a lot of challenges. Many of them were not financial, but logistically, I don't know, it's really hard to take two children to two different schools at the same time. And, you know, you can't do this by yourself. And when you are a single parent, you have to. And we were talking about in the office today, is like, you know, if I went somewhere in the evening, I couldn't take a babysitter home. Because it was just me back at the house, and you can't leave a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old home alone while you go drive a babysitter home. And people don't live in neighborhoods like they did when I was a kid and I walked, but you don't walk, you don't make a teenage girl walk home anymore by herself. Also another problem for women. But the idea that there are barriers for people that we cannot capture in our statistical summaries of who we're talking about. So there are 42 million people who are food insecure in America. It's a giant number. You know, I don't even know how to get my brain around that number. And I will tell you, it is more people than live in the entire country of Canada. The number of people who don't know if they are going to have breakfast tomorrow morning in the United States could people an entire country in North America. How is that possible? And how is it possible we don't respond to it? Well, we actually do. The United States government does have a nutrition safety net. The most critical piece of which is called the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It used to be called food stamps. And why they don't just call it that again, I don't know, because I don't know a single anti-hunger advocate who does not say the SNAP program, formerly known as food stamps. Just so you all know what we're talking about. So, that is what we're talking about. Now, it actually is probably a more accurate acronym than calling something a food stamp, because it's Supplemental Nutrition Assistance. It's only food, and it is not meant to be your entire diet. Why is that? Because the average food stamp benefit is about $4 a day per person. Now, I don't know about you, but that's like a latte at Starbucks. I mean, there's no way. It also ignores the kinds of things and infrastructure that you need in order to actually survive in a household. So that food assistance doesn't cover that. It's not allowed to cover that. But if we look at that nutrition safety net and we say that's what it's meant to be, it's meant to hold you up so that you can get stable again and get yourself back on track to get back in the paid labor force and support your family. Now, if you're a woman What are the problems with that equation? Because there isn't enough supplemental nutrition assistance in the world that will help you find childcare for your children. And without childcare for your children, you can't get into the paid labor force. And when you get into the paid labor force, if you don't have a college degree, you're making minimum wage. And if you make minimum wage and you have 2 children, you are by definition living in poverty in America. Most of the people on food stamps actually have jobs. They are employed. So these are people who are trying to patch together a life that has no broad-based infrastructure support. So when the president talks about infrastructure, and he gets all hot and bothered about building a wall or repairing roads, okay, I guess we need to do that. I'm the first person who doesn't like to drive through a pothole. But the infrastructure I'd like to see is an infrastructure that recognizes that for women to be able to raise their children in safety with love and support and optimism and possibilities for the future, they need a whole different kind of infrastructure. Not the least of which is a system of reproductive health that allows them the control over their bodies that will give them opportunity instead of limiting what they are able to do. So it's just like this is why I asked if I could do this, because the dormant feminist in me, who has been sleeping since 2011, is alive and well, and it feels more enraged than ever. Not just because I'm living at a time when the leadership in our House and our Senate and the White House wouldn't understand the lives of people who are struggling if they heard about them daily, which they do, but because a lot of advocates in the movement in which I am involved know not how to recognize this issue as a women's issue, and do not know how to frame solutions that embrace women's lives, and are afraid to talk about issues about reproductive health. They're afraid to talk about issues about domestic violence, which is what makes a huge percentage of women homeless. They're afraid to talk about issues of child care because that's not what they do. But you cannot and we will not change the lives of people who struggle in this country unless we recognize who is struggling and why, and build an infrastructure that will meet those needs and create opportunities for them to change their lives and the lives of their children. And if we do that, then together we will transform how it is to how it should be. Thank you. Sorry, I just sort of exited there. Sorry. Okay. Wow, that was a moment. Questions? Challenges, problems, I'll listen to everything.
I have a question. Does MAZON, I'm sorry, I'm pronouncing it. MAZON. Does MAZON work with, other than the Feminist Majority Program, does the program work with other organizations, with like Moms Rising, Carry Across Generations?
We actually do, we've done a number of tweet chats, right? I don't know what you call them. Tweet chats with Moms Rising, and we have colleagues in our DC office that work very closely with the staff at Moms Rising. Most of MAZON's work is done with the anti-hunger movement. So we work very closely with a lot of big national anti-hunger organizations as well as direct service providers. We're not a direct service provider. We are an advocacy organization. That's why it's a place for me to be home. And we are engaged in change. But we work very closely with organizations whose job it is to make certain that people have what they need now, so that those of us who are working for a better future have an opportunity to do that. And they often work very closely with us because they recognize one cannot happen without the other. So yes, we work with lots of organizations. And most of our work is done at a national level. So it's more unusual for us to partner with local organizations like NCJWLA, but because it's a remarkable institution this isn't an opportunity that we wanted to pass by. And this particular chapter of NCJW has long been very active in the women's rights movement here in Los Angeles, and it really carries the banner, especially around childcare, because you guys are the first people that did that little stroller thing, I remember. I am old, I remember many things. Anyway, is that, okay. Other, comedy. It's like, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if this is a question, but I know that the LAUSD, they have a breakfast and lunch program. And while I volunteered in Light Up the Library, we got a grant to go into elementary schools and to replace, help give new books to libraries that are underserved. But the school that I went to, very interesting, Barrett Elementary, is a very poor school. And the principal started dinner. So they have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. She took her, she found ways to manipulate her budget so that she could bring in food for dinner so that these kids would also have 3 meals a day. So I'm sure that, it's heartbreaking. I mean, I left there and I started crying because of this whole thing. But there has to be out-of-the-box thinking and some creative ways of getting to these people.
So there are, the programs that are designed to provide nutritional support to children, many of them are tied to schools. So there are school lunch programs, there's school breakfast programs, some free, some partial payment. There's after-school programs in Title I schools where they provide a snack, which the money, when the district and or the on-site principal uses the money and supplements, they actually supper, they call it supper. There's also a backpack program where kids on a Friday take a backpack home that has food for the weekend for them. It's not just for the child, but it helps to stretch for the family. There's a huge program that USDA, many of these food and nutrition programs are run by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and there's a huge program that they have that's about how hunger doesn't take a summer vacation. So they have programs that are designed to feed children, but they have to be done, you have to eat the meal on site. So there's a whole issue about that and about that kids have to get to a site. There has to be a site in a community willing to host the program. And sometimes that's hard to find because the facility has to be open. So our experience has been that the U.S. Department of Agriculture is beyond motivated to try to find opportunities and ways to get nutrition assistance to people who need it. Not quite sure what Purdue's vision is around this, but Purdue did say when he first was named as the Secretary of Agriculture that he was not going to do anything to the food stamp program because, in his words, you don't fix something that isn't broken. So he clearly understands that. Whether or not he'll be allowed to do that, we don't know. So one of the things that you should be aware of, I'd be remiss as an advocate if I didn't talk about this, is that the Farm Bill, heard of the Farm Bill? Mm-hmm. Okay, so the Farm Bill is this huge, comprehensive piece of legislation that comes up for reauthorization every 5 years. And until I went to MAZON, I had no idea what the complexity, the breadth of this particular piece of legislation was. It's like nothing I've ever seen. And it covers issues about forestry and about marine life and water and trees and anything that you can think of that has to do with cultivation and farming. And then also there's a huge part of it, it's called the nutrition title, that has to do with providing food and sustenance to poor people. Why does the bill look like this? This is where crop insurance is in our country. This is where the supports for farmers come from. It's where pilot programs about organic farming are. Why is all this put together in one piece of giant legislation? Because in the olden days, the Republicans and the Democrats used to work together, and they would compromise. It's a word they don't hear back there anymore, but you had rural states, not always divided by red and blue, by the way, right? So you have members of Congress who represented rural parts of America whose big concern is about farming and providing the food that becomes the meals that people need to eat. And then you had people who are from the urban parts of the country that were very concerned about the poor communities that weren't getting enough to eat. And they compromised, they worked together, and they said, well, I'll vote for your thing if you'll vote for mine. This is, it's called legislative log rolling. It's a concept, it's political science. It's very much the way traditional legislation used to happen in this country. It is still one of the last big pieces of bipartisan legislation in the United States Congress. At least it has been watching. Not my big record of development across my fingers. Probably the rest of my staff doing the same thing. And probably spinning jinx it. That the leadership has always worked together to come up with compromise. Now, the nutrition title is very large. It's a great big pot of money. It is $92 billion. That's a lot of money. So people who are worried about budget cutting and tax reform, they look at that big number and they're like, ooh, let's go take some of that. So people like Paul Ryan, this is go right ahead, do it. That he has his eyes on that money, and he thinks it's waste money. Well, he has his priorities. His priority is there should be a balanced budget and no deficit, and he doesn't care who gets hurt in doing that, and he doesn't care what gets devastated, because that is an end in and of itself. I don't understand that. I don't know why somebody wants to be in Congress and do that. It doesn't make sense to me. That's what he believes. But there are, in fact, people who are in the leadership in the Republican Party, especially in the Senate, who have always worked very closely with the leaders of the Democratic Party to fashion a farm bill that meets everybody's needs. Now, remember what I said about what's in there. There's stuff about water in there. I mean, everything. And so the senators that represent states that have issues about these things don't necessarily fall neatly into party categories. So they have to work together around some of this. And they have varying concerns that they try to negotiate through. So we're hopeful that that'll happen again and that there won't be massive cuts. The other thing that'll happen is that it'll get delayed and delayed and delayed. The man who is the chair of the House Agriculture Committee, Mike Conaway, comes from Texas. And he is committed, although he actually lied to my face about something else when she said publicly, I found that out publicly, and he said the exact opposite on the floor of the House. So maybe he lied about this to me too. But he said that he is committed to get a farm bill out in 2018. And, come hell or high water, he is going to do that. And that won't happen unless the Democrats come along. So he has to work with them, so we'll have to see what happens. The problem is that you have to have a spine when you're in the minority party, and you have to be willing to stand up for stuff. We just don't know what will happen. But those programs work, and those programs are vital. Are they adequate? No. Are they necessary? Yes. So the idea of limiting them any further will cause devastation in this country, like people have never seen. Remember when I started, I said how hunger is pretty invisible in America? It won't be anymore. It won't be. You will be able to walk into classrooms and you'll be able to tell who the kids are who are getting free lunch because they won't be getting lunch anymore. And this is the tragedy of what's happening, that it happens way too under the radar. So it's up to us to illuminate it. That's what that truck's all about. Did you have a question?
I'm curious to know if Native American communities are served, or if the truck goes into those communities. What impact on those communities?
So the question was whether or not Native American communities are served by these programs, and whether or not the truck has gone into Native communities. Lisa, do you want to say something?
Hi, everybody. I'm Lisa with MAZON.
Stand up.
And stand up. Just briefly, interesting you should say that. I recently got back from Fayetteville, Arkansas, and the truck visited our partner at the University of Arkansas School of Law. It's a mouthful. We support and partner with their food.
Talk louder.
Sorry.
Hello. We partner with the University of Arkansas School of Law's Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative. And essentially what those folks are doing there is working on building infrastructure. So Indian country, which is rural America for Native Americans and reservations, especially where there is a lot of hunger and poverty, they're building infrastructure, legal infrastructure, so that the tribes can control their own food and ag policy and food system, which MAZON is extremely happy to support. And so we took the truck into the community specifically to about 150 Native teens who were there for a summit last month. And it was an extraordinary experience because these teens are so articulate and so motivated, age 15 to 19, and they're being mentored to be the next generation of Native farmer, rancher, ag lawyer, policymakers. Oh, I get so choked up about it. But so it's a really important piece of our rural and remote work, and we're doing it.
Right. And Barbara Grover, who's in the back of the room, stand up for a second, Barbara? So Barbara Grover is the photographer, the photojournalist who took pictures. And Barbara also went on to native lands. And so there are many people whose images you're seeing there who actually live on in Indian country and live on reservations. And the programs that are designed for Native communities on Native lands are different from those that are part of the general infrastructure, but those programs are supported by the federal government, and they are vital parts of their support and safety net programs, and they exist as separate programs that are definitely a part, for us, an important part of what our advocacy priorities are, because we know there are not many other anti-hunger organizations who have made a commitment to moving the agenda of those communities as a part of the priorities for our federal government. So we work very closely with them. Yes. Nice. I have a question. Yes, sir.
Catholics, what can we do in the context of what you just talked about? What can each one of us do to help MAZON get to where we need to?
So there's a petition in the truck. Did you sign the petition in the truck?
I signed the petition.
Okay. So there's a way to go to our website and push that stuff out further. So that's one of the ways that we can do this. But what we are on our website, there are all kinds of advocacy actions that you can take. Because as I said, that our goal is to organize people and to get an active response so that we can pressure for change at the federal level. So for our purposes, the important thing to do is not only to engage in food drives and volunteering at soup kitchens, but it's to look at what those underlying causes are and what some of the reasons and approaches that government takes to respond, because only government has the ability to really respond at a scale that is necessary to address the needs of 42 million people. So at the state level in California, there's legislative opportunities. At the federal level, there certainly will be, and it's the Farm Bill that will become of critical importance. And there'll be a whole series of things that we will have on the website that people can do as the Farm Bill begins to move forward sometime in the fall. It should start in the fall. If he wants to get it out in 2018, Conway's going to have to start doing some work in the fall. So that would be. Okay, we've been, you have what? Oh, I can't see. There's one more?
We're going to explain the letter for you.
Oh, you're gonna, I'm just getting off. I'm just moving off the stage. I didn't think they were. I'm just gonna say my thank you and get on, and then Maya's coming back. So that I can sit down. Thank you.
We have to work on our hand signals a little bit better. But I want to say, my name is Samuel Chu. I'm the National Synagogue Organizer. I know some of you, and it's been a privilege being here and partnering. And just as Abby has said, children don't exist independently in a vacuum. One of the things that the question that was asked up front here about what can be done, when Maya actually called me this week about what can we do right now in this moment in California, I said, well, funny that you ask, Because in 2014, MAZON, working with our synagogue partners, led the first successful state-level campaign that banned what is now known as lunch shaming. And the practice of not only denying food to children, but also publicly taking away and dumping their food in the cafeteria. And also, the shaming practice extends to hand stamping. We've had photos and documents of kids coming home with their hands stamped with the word money. And after that success, what has happened is that we're beginning to move from state to state. Our grantee partners in New Mexico earlier this year passed a law that also banned a similar legislation that banned shaming and debt collecting practices in the state. We currently have a MAZON-sponsored bill, the Senate Bill 250 here in California, that will make California the largest state yet to pass a similar kind of ban on shaming. And it is currently stuck in committee in a state assembly appropriation. The deadline for it to move out of committee is next Friday. So timing is everything. And if you are so inclined to want to voice support for this particular advocacy opportunity, there are some clipboards passing around. There's a copy of the letter that I think is on your chair. You're welcome to read it, take it home. But if you want to sign on to it, please do so. We'll send it up to Sacramento to the chair of the Appropriation Committee in the Assembly. And just to echo what I think Abby, our fierce leader, has said, one of the things that people don't realize is people ask me all the time, why do we choose to shame children? And the answer is because we have been shaming the mothers in this country for being poor for generations. We have accepted that shaming is acceptable because we have accepted that women can be shamed for being poor. And I think that that's the message that hopefully you will take with you as you think about taking the letter and signing on. And thank you, Maya, for giving us this opportunity to partner with you. And among many of the different issues that we've worked on in the state, NCJWLA has been a key partner. And so thank you so much.
And just to add one other way that you can help with this, you can also call your own assembly member, and they might be on the appropriations committee even, but just give them a call, look up who it is, and give them a call this week and say, I really would like my assembly member to vote yes on this bill, Senate Bill 250. It takes literally 30 seconds to do. And it's not scary, it's just a staff person, and they will tally it on their whiteboard, and that does make a difference. So I just wanted to thank Abby, first of all, for bringing this issue to us, raising awareness, talking about it through a feminist lens, which I think is so crucial, and really bringing the truck to us. And I want to thank everyone at MAZON, Ma, Liz, Sarah, Jackie and Craig at the truck. I don't want to, Samuel, I don't know if I'm missing
There are
anybody.
like 20-something.
There's so many people who worked on this, and everyone was awesome. And I want to thank my interns, Julia and Nikki and Joni, for doing everything all the time, and Carrie. And thank you to all of you, and hope to see you at future events. If you haven't seen the truck, it is still open until 9-ish or 8:45, so go check it out, and please sign the petition. And there's an evaluation on your chair in your packet. Please fill it out, and you can hand it to Nikki or Julia in the back, or place it on the table in the back. Thank you.